The cold wind howled through the empty house, rattling the windows like a ghostly whisper. Elena stood in the doorway, her fingers clutching the divorce papers, her eyes hollow with disbelief. Just a week ago, she had a husband who promised her forever. Now, forever had been reduced to a signature at the bottom of a page. Daniel was gone. Gone to her. Victoria Lancaster. The name burned in Elena's mind like poison. The woman who had it all, wealth, power, beauty, had decided she wanted something else. Someone else. And Daniel had been foolish enough to believe he was worth leaving everything behind for. Elena's knees trembled, but she refused to fall. He isn't worth it, she told herself, forcing air into her lungs. If he could trade years of love for money, then maybe he never truly loved me at all. But even as she thought it, the pain was unbearable. The news of Daniel's affair had spread like wildfire. Their friends whispered behind her back, some offering pity while others feigned surprise. But the worst part? It wasn't just an affair. It was a complete replacement. Daniel had moved into Victoria's grand mansion within days of leaving. The moment the ink dried on the divorce papers, he had flaunted his new life, parading around in expensive suits, riding luxury cars, and indulging in a lifestyle he never could afford on his own. Elena, on the other hand, had to start over. She had built her life around Daniel, sacrificing her career to support his dreams. Now, she was alone in a small apartment, searching for jobs that didn't look down on women who had taken a break from their careers for marriage. It was humiliating, but it wasn't going to break her. No, if Daniel thought she would fade into nothingness, he was wrong. At first, Daniel believed he had won. Victoria lavished him with gifts, a Rolex, a new wardrobe, vacations to places he had only seen in magazines. He sipped on champagne with businessmen, dressed in tailored suits, and for the first time in his life, he felt important. But something was off. Victoria was nothing like Elena. Where Elena had been warm, loving, and supportive, Victoria was cold and calculating. She never looked at him with admiration, only possession. "Wear this," she ordered one evening, tossing him an expensive suit. "Where are we going?" She arched a perfectly sculpted brow. "You don't need to ask. Just follow." Daniel swallowed his pride. It was a small price to pay for this life, wasn't it? But as weeks passed, the shine began to fade. Victoria dictated what he wore, how he spoke, who he could talk to. She introduced him as my companion rather than her partner. When she spoke to her high society friends, she never included him in conversations, and when he tried to share his thoughts, she would dismiss him with a simple, "Daniel, dear, this isn't your world." He had traded love for wealth, but wealth had no warmth. While Daniel was drowning in the gilded cage of his own making, Elena was rising. She refused to stay broken. She took online courses, refreshed her skills, and landed a job, one that paid better than anything she had imagined. It was hard at first, navigating a new world without the man she had once leaned on, but she learned to stand on her own. And then, one evening, fate decided to throw a cruel twist. She was attending a business gala, her first major event since reclaiming her life. Dressed in a sleek black dress, confidence radiating from her, she stepped into the grand ballroom and saw them. Daniel and Victoria. He looked different. His shoulders weren't as squared. His eyes, once filled with arrogance, now seemed hollow. And when he saw her, he froze. For the first time, Elena wasn't the broken one. He was. Daniel couldn't stop staring. Elena had changed. She was stronger, radiant, powerful. She didn't look like the woman he had left behind. No, this woman, she was something else entirely. And for the first time since leaving, he felt a sickening realization settle in his gut. He had made the wrong choice. But there was no turning back. Because Victoria had everything, except love. And he was just another one of her possessions. As the night ended, Elena walked past him, her head high, her confidence unshaken. And as she did, she whispered, "Enjoy your riches, Daniel. I'll enjoy my freedom." And with that, she walked away, towards a future where she no longer needed him. And for the first time, he was the one left behind. Daniel watched as Elena disappeared into the crowd, her silhouette fading under the dazzling ballroom lights. His fingers tightened around his glass of whiskey, his mind screaming at him to move, to stop her, to say something, anything. But he didn't, because he knew. It was too late. The world he had built around himself, the illusion of power, wealth, and status, was nothing more than a golden prison. And the key? He had thrown it away the moment he left Elena for Victoria. The ride home was silent. Victoria's diamond-studded heels clicked against the marble floors of their penthouse as she walked in ahead of him, tossing her clutch onto a chair. "You looked distracted tonight," she said, not even bothering to glance at him. Daniel loosened his tie, his jaw tight. "I ran into Elena." At that, Victoria finally looked up, her eyes narrowing. "So? She's different." His voice was almost admiring. Victoria let out a cold laugh. "She was always insignificant, Daniel. Just a housewife playing pretend. Don't tell me you're actually missing her." He didn't respond, because deep down he knew he was. And Victoria knew it too. Her lips curled into a smirk as she leaned against the bar, pouring herself a glass of wine. "Do you know why I chose you?" she asked, swirling the drink in her glass. Daniel frowned. "What do you mean?" She chuckled. "You think you were special?" "No, darling. I just wanted a man who was easy to control. Someone who would do as he was told. You were convenient." His stomach twisted. "So that's all I am to you?" "Oh, don't act so wounded," she said, rolling her eyes. "You left your wife for money. You knew exactly what you were doing." She took a sip of her wine before adding, "And if you ever become boring, I can always replace you." Daniel felt his blood run cold. Replace him. Just like he had replaced Elena. Only now, he was the one who would be discarded when Victoria got tired of him. And the worst part? There was nothing he could do about it. Elena leaned against the balcony of her apartment, the city lights stretching out before her. The night was crisp, and for the first time in a long time, she felt peaceful. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. "Elena, can we talk?" Her heart skipped a beat. "Daniel." She stared at the message, her fingers hovering over the screen. A few months ago, she would have jumped at the chance to hear from him. She would have agonized over what to say, over whether he regretted leaving. But now? She didn't need his apology. She had built a new life, one that didn't revolve around him. She had a job, confidence, and most importantly, she had herself again. So she did the only thing that felt right. She deleted the message. And as she turned away from the city lights, she smiled, because this time, she was the one walking away. The first time Daniel realized he was losing everything, it was subtle. A small thing. Victoria started canceling dinner plans. Then, she started leaving him out of important social events. And then, the credit card declined. At first, he thought it was a mistake. But when he called the bank, the truth hit him like a freight train. Victoria had revoked his access to all her accounts. The wealth he had enjoyed, never his. The mansion, the cars, the suits, all hers. And now, he was nothing more than an accessory she had grown tired of. One evening, Daniel came home to find Victoria sitting on the sofa, dressed in a silky red gown, a glass of wine in her hand. But she wasn't alone. Sitting across from her was another man. Younger, handsome, a businessman in a sleek designer suit, the same type of man Daniel had once envied. Daniel's stomach twisted. "Who is this?" Victoria barely spared him a glance. "This? Oh, this is Nathan." She smiled at the man beside her, placing a hand on his knee. "He's going to be my new companion." The words hit Daniel like a slap. "You're replacing me?" His voice was hoarse, almost desperate. Victoria let out a slow, amused laugh. "Oh, Daniel, don't look so shocked. You knew this would happen eventually." She leaned forward, resting her chin on her hand. "Did you really think I'd keep you around forever?" His hands clenched into fists. "I gave up everything for you." She tilted her head, pretending to think. "No, darling. You gave up everything for money. I just happened to be the one offering it." Daniel felt the world tilt beneath him. He had left a woman who truly loved him for a woman who never saw him as anything more than a temporary plaything. And now she was done playing. "I'll give you until tomorrow morning to pack your things," Victoria said, standing up. "Be a dear, and don't make a scene." Daniel's pride burned. His chest ached. But there was nothing left to fight for. Because just like he had thrown Elena away, Victoria had done the same to him. It wasn't long before Daniel realized just how alone he truly was. Without Victoria's money, his so-called friends vanished. The luxury lifestyle?
Gone.
He couldn't even go back to his old career. His connections had dried up, and no one respected a man who had built his life on someone else's wealth. One night, with nowhere to go, he found himself outside Elena's apartment. The place was small compared to Victoria's mansion, but warm and inviting, the lights glowing through the windows. For a long moment, he just stood there, his heart pounding. He had once shared a home with her, shared a life, a future, and he had thrown it away. Before he could think twice, he knocked. A few seconds later, the door opened. Elena stood there, dressed in casual homewear, her hair tied up, her face glowing with peace. The sight of her made his throat tighten. She didn't look like the woman he had left behind. She looked happier, stronger. And that's when he realized she didn't need him anymore. "Elena," he started, his voice almost breaking. I made a mistake." She crossed her arms, tilting her head slightly. And what mistake was that? His pride screamed at him to walk away. But desperation won. "I shouldn't have left you," he admitted, finally saying the words that had haunted him for months. "I thought I wanted money, but—" "You thought money was more valuable than love," Elena interrupted, her voice calm, almost pitying. "And now you don't even have that." Daniel swallowed hard. "Please. Just give me another chance." She exhaled softly, looking at him for a long moment. And then she said the words that shattered the last bit of hope he had left. "I don't love you anymore, Daniel." The finality in her voice broke him. His shoulders slumped, his heart sinking into the deepest pit of regret. Because for the first time in his life, he truly understood what he had lost. Elena didn't just move on. She had outgrown him. And as she gently closed the door in his face, Daniel realized he had no one to blame but himself. A few months later, Elena sat in a cafe, sipping on her coffee, scrolling through the news on her phone. Her lips curled into a small, satisfied smile when she saw the headline. Victoria Lancaster announces engagement to business tycoon Nathan Hayes. And right below it, Daniel Carter spotted working as a salesman after falling from high society. Elena chuckled softly, taking another sip of her coffee. Karma had done its job. And she was finally free. Daniel sat in his tiny, one-room apartment, staring at the flickering light bulb above him. The once polished man who wore designer suits and attended elite parties was now reduced to nothing. A cheap, stained couch. A half-empty bottle of whiskey. A rejection letter from yet another job. He had lost everything. And worse, no one cared. Victoria had discarded him like trash. Elena had moved on. His former friends? They didn't even return his calls. The world had forgotten Daniel Carter. But he wasn't going to accept this. Not like this. If he couldn't have happiness, neither could they. For weeks, Daniel watched from the shadows. He studied them. Victoria, who flaunted her new fiancé, Nathan, like a trophy. Elena, who was thriving in her career, surrounded by new people, new opportunities, new love. And it ate him alive. Why should they get to live happily while he suffered? So he made a choice. If the world had taken everything from him, then he would take everything from them. Victoria thought she was untouchable. But Daniel knew things about her, things she didn't want the public to know. One night, under the cover of darkness, he sent out emails. Anonymous. Strategic. Within days, headlines exploded across social media. Billionaire heiress Victoria Lancaster involved in a legal business scandal. Victoria's engagement at risk as dark secrets emerge. Daniel smirked as he watched the chaos unfold. Nathan, the man who had replaced him, hated scandals. Within a week, He had called off the engagement. Victoria's world? Crumbling.
And Daniel?
He was only just getting started. Elena was harder to break. She had built her life back up with genuine effort, not stolen wealth like Victoria. But Daniel knew one thing. People didn't forget betrayals. So he spread rumors. Anonymous messages sent to her workplace. Whispers in the industry. Fake evidence linking her to corruption. It wasn't enough to destroy her, but it was enough to shake her. To make her feel the way he had felt. Alone.
Betrayed.
Helpless. Or so he thought. But what Daniel forgot was that Elena wasn't the same woman she used to be. She wasn't the fragile, heartbroken wife waiting for someone to save her. She was stronger.
Smarter.
Unstoppable. And when she found out what Daniel was doing, she didn't break. She fought back. Elena had connections now. People who respected her. Lawyers, CEOs, influential figures who saw her as more than just Daniel Carter's ex-wife. And when she exposed his lies, the rumors about her vanished. But Daniel? He had made a fatal mistake. He left a trail. His anonymous messages?
Traced.
His fake evidence? Debunked. His bank account? Frozen due to fraud. And then came the final blow. One day, Daniel received a notice. A lawsuit. Filed by Elena. For defamation, harassment, and cybercrimes. His heart pounded as he read the legal documents. Elena wasn't just winning. She was burying him. The courtroom was cold. Daniel sat in his cheap suit, looking across at Elena. She was calm, poised, untouchable. And as the judge ruled in her favor, his stomach sank. He had tried to destroy her. Instead, he had destroyed himself. The lawsuit drained his last bit of money. His reputation was beyond repair.
His record was now stained.
No job, no future, no way out. As he walked out of the courthouse, defeated, a familiar voice stopped him. Elena, he breathed, turning to face her. She stared at him, her expression unreadable. You really thought I'd let you ruin me? His throat tightened. I just wanted to make things right. She let out a cold laugh. No, Daniel. You wanted revenge because you couldn't handle seeing me happy. He looked away, shame burning through him. What now? Elena's gaze didn't soften. You live with your choices. Just like I did when you walked away. She stepped closer, her voice quiet but powerful. This is the last time we will ever speak. You are nothing to me now. And just like before, she walked away. But this time, Daniel knew. She would never come back. And neither would his second chance. Without him. Months later, Elena sat on a beach, watching the sunset, a soft smile on her lips. The past was finally behind her. And for the first time in years, she felt free. Somewhere far away, in a dark, empty apartment, Daniel Carter sat alone, staring at the walls. No money, no power, no love, just regret. And the realization that he had lost everything forever. Daniel had lost everything. No money, no job, no future. The world had moved on, but he was stuck. Alone. Forgotten. A relic of his own greed and mistakes. At first, he tried to fight. He tried to get back on his feet. But no one would hire a man with a ruined reputation and a lawsuit to his name. He applied for lower-paying jobs, but even they turned him away.
And Victoria?
She had blocked him everywhere. The woman who once made him feel like a king now pretended he didn't exist. For the first time in his life, Daniel understood what it meant to be truly, utterly powerless. One night, Daniel stood on a bridge, staring at the dark river below. The thought had been in his mind for weeks now. What was the point of living when he had nothing left? No home, no money, no love. The man who once lived in a mansion was now sleeping on the streets. The people who once envied him didn't even remember his name.
It would be so easy.
Just one step, one fall, and it would all be over. But just as he took a deep breath, preparing to end it all, a voice stopped him. Pathetic. A deal with the devil. Daniel turned sharply, his heart pounding. A man in a black coat stood a few feet away, watching him. He was tall, dressed in expensive, Custom-tailored clothes, the kind of wealth Daniel once had. His face was unreadable, but his eyes, they saw through him. Who are you? Daniel croaked. The man smirked. Someone who knows how to spot desperation. Daniel swallowed hard. If you're here to give me some nonsense about life getting better, save it. The man chuckled. Oh, I'm not here to inspire you. I'm here to offer you a deal. Daniel's breath hitched. A deal? An opportunity, the man corrected. He stepped closer, his voice smooth as silk. You were a fool, Daniel Carter. You gambled away everything for a woman who never cared for you. And now you're nothing. Daniel clenched his fists. He already knew that. But, the man continued, his tone almost seductive, what if I told you there was a way to get it all back? Daniel's eyes widened. You're lying. The man tilted his head. Am I? Daniel's heart pounded. The idea of having another chance was intoxicating. But deep down, something about this man felt wrong. Like making a deal with him meant losing something worse. But what did Daniel have left to lose? What's the price? He finally asked. The man's smirk widened. Your soul. Daniel hesitated. He wasn't stupid. He had heard stories. Selling your soul wasn't just a metaphor. It meant something. But what choice did he have? A life of suffering and regret? Or a second chance at power? His hands shook. His mind raced. And then, with a deep breath, he did the one thing he swore he'd never do. He held out his hand.
Deal.
The man grinned, shaking Daniel's hand. The moment their palms met, a cold, burning sensation shot through his veins. Daniel gasped, clutching his chest as darkness wrapped around him.
Pain. Power.
Something inhuman surged inside him. And when it was over, he was no longer the same. Looking into a nearby puddle, his reflection stared back at him. His eyes, they weren't his. Something inside him had changed. And as the mysterious man laughed in the shadows, Daniel realized he had made a mistake far worse than leaving Elena. This wasn't a second chance. This was the beginning of something far more terrifying. And there was no way out. To be continued? Smiling Face with Horns. Thanks for watching. For more stories, please subscribe Eververse Novel.